There we go. Right on time. Look at us coordinating again. I
We
like
are.
this. I
Yeah.
thought you were wearing a black top today.
Yeah, not when I just quickly got into work. So here you go today. All right.
It was a quick little wardrobe change. You can come on in and get
Yes, sir.
comfortable. We're getting adjusted, everyone. We got DC and DC. So I'm actually in Washington, DC, visiting my bestie here. So this is the first time that we're really in frame. But I am so excited about this conversation. I'm so excited to be joined not only by DeAngelo, but also our guest speaker here, Jane. Jane, hello. How are you?
I'm very good today. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. We are so happy to hear that. And we are so happy to have every beautiful person out there. For anyone who is not familiar, my name is Blair G. Hervey. I am the founder and CEO of The Corporate Strategist. I am joined by my colorful co host, my bestie, my soul friend of 20 plus years, DeAngelo Crane. Say hi, D.
Hi, Blair Hervey, and hi, Jane. So excited as I am every day to be here again with you in this space, to be sharing and talking with people about the Black DEIBA Collective and all the great work that many people are doing in this space to cultivate belonging for Black employees and Black entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. And so again, welcome, Jane. We are so excited to have you. And we love getting into our sunny segment just to get us started. Will you kick us off, D?
Sure, I can. So, as we do here every day on the Black DEIBA Collective, we practice the art of the check in. And what does that mean? Is that we are asking you, leaders who are listening, colleagues who are listening, to go a little deeper with each other and ask, how are people doing? How are they feeling? Engage with them in some meaningful conversation and not just a shallow, what's your day like? So, we're going to do that as we always do here at the Black DEIBA Collective. We're going to practice it with our DEIBA superhero today, Jane. Jane, how's your heart? How's your mind? How's your soul? How are you feeling today?
Well, this is a wonderful opportunity because I just got very good news. I'm on the head of the Human Rights Commission in my town, and we have put out two proclamations, one for Pride Month and one for Juneteenth. And I just got a call from the town clerk that I was supposed to be on the consent agenda, which they all just say, yeah, pass it. But this time they don't want to just say, yeah. They want to talk about Juneteenth in the town council in my very white, all white people town, where the whole town council is white. And they want to talk about it. And I get to be there and I get to talk about it with them. So this is good. I'm in a good mood.
Good.
Well, we're excited about that. That's some very exciting news that organizations and councils and cities are starting to embrace Juneteenth, because when you think about what the subject is today around belonging, does help to create belonging for people once they know they are valued and recognized and heard, right? Yeah.
Right.
So Blair, how are you feeling today? How's your heart? How's your mind? How's your soul?
I'm feeling like a big boss lady today because I woke up with several things that I needed to get done for my business. I'm learning new things every day as a brand new entrepreneur. I'm excited to not only be a part of this journey, but to bring other people like yourself and my wonderful executive assistant. Shout out to Ashley Ray along on this journey. So I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm good. Except we did not have our stage manager here today to set up the staging for us, but we are here. This is live. This is what we do. We just come to you, no matter how the stage looks, to just bring you joy, love, laughter, and talk about issues impacting us. So I'm good.
Good. We'll take good. And I'm telling you, when I talk about dedication to something, this man is really on top of it, because I tell y'all all the time, it's not that he didn't want to do this because he loves having these conversations, but doing this every single day on top of having a 9 to 5 and on top of having a 24/7 best friend like myself, you got a lot on your plate. So kudos to DeAngelo today. All right, y'all. So again, welcome every beautiful body out there, and welcome Jane. And thank you for joining us in this valuable conversation. For anyone who's not familiar with Jane, she is an experienced diversity and equity educator. She has trained graduate students, public health officials, medical professionals, and college administrators, and uses deep listening methods that focuses on mutual understanding. Jane has 45 years of anti-racism work, 29 years of teaching graduate students, and an expertise in unconscious bias and deep listening. Jane, we are so excited to have you and to learn from you and for us to share in this experience with you. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Now, I know we renamed this topic Belonging 101, and when I went through some of your documents, when you filled out your initial form, you entitled this particular topic, Can We Talk?, which I love. So I can't wait to hear how those two topics intertwine. But before we get started, we'd love to hear about how you actually got involved in this work and a little bit more about yourself in your own words.
Okay, I love to tell this story. I grew up in a neighborhood that was completely integrated before there was a name for completely integrated. It was right near the Bronx in New York City. Everybody lived there. Lots of Black people lived there. Lots of ethnic other people lived there. It was a project right down the street. I had lots of friends every place. And the father of my oldest friend was an affirmative action officer and a housing equity officer right after World War II. So by the time I was 5 or 6, I was in their house and I was reading the Amsterdam News, and I was astounded because it was the only newspaper I ever saw that was full of Black people. All the other newspapers were full of white people. So I asked Mr. Smith, what is this? And so boy, did he tell me. And he told me what the problems were. He told me what his work was. And he said, and you have to do it too. Now, I was 6 or 7 years old. I was just learning how to read, and I was reading this newspaper. And he said, and this is your job. So I've been doing it ever since.
What? Come on, advocacy. And now, was this gentleman, was he a Black gentleman as well? Did you mention?
Yeah.
And he said, you've got to do this work. I love hearing that. He put that onus on you as a young child. And not only did he put it on you, you accepted that, not only as a challenge, but as your life's work. So thank you for that work. Thank you for sharing in that story as well. Dee, let's get right into the topic.
Well, can we talk about today's topic?
Can we talk?
We're talking really today about belonging, but I just posted on my LinkedIn today that really that need for belonging starts when we're born, right, at birth, because we're looking for that. How do we feel valued, cared for? What's our significance? What's our place in a family unit? How do we make sure that we're giving back to that family unit? How are we benefiting from that family unit, right? How do we show up? What does that mean? What's our role in that family unit? And that carries over with us for our entire life. And especially when we go into these corporate workspaces, we're saying, are we valued? Am I heard? Do you see me? The same values that we have as a child, we carry those throughout life. And so today we're really talking about those core values. And if you need a stat about belonging, is high belonging created a 56% increase in job performance. And that's to a Harvard Business Law review study that they done about belonging. So, belonging is not just a nice thing to do. It truly goes to that bottom line of productivity, performance, and advocacy for your company. So Jane, I've been working in this space now for 17 years, helping companies understand belonging, and they all have different interpretations of it. So just at its core, tell me, how would you define belonging for the people who are tuning in today?
Okay. People have to recognize that you're there. They have to know your name. That's the first. I'm a teacher, and the first thing you do is learn everybody's name.
Yeah.
You have to have a job in the company that allows you to be successful because it reflects your skills. People have to listen to you when you talk, and you have to talk to other people and ask them what they think. You have to set up relationships with other people so that you are saying, well, this is what I think. And then the next line is, and what do you think? And try to figure out how to pull everybody together. I was thinking when you asked me to talk about belonging, what can companies do? Teach people how to engage with each other. When somebody says, hi, how are you? And the other person says, I'm fine. There should be something else that comes after that.
That part. Yes.
It's like the way you started this program. So what we need to do to help people feel a sense of belonging is for everybody needs to acknowledge that everybody else is there. When they're sitting around a table talking about how to solve problems, they have to listen to each other.
That's right.
And the consensus by the leader has to reflect the inclusion of all the ideas of the people who are there. So that's one thing, and that's the work thing. The other thing is to feel a sense of belonging. Everybody always socializes to some degree with the people they work with. Everybody has to be included in the socializing. You can't just have the white guys go out and play golf.
Come on.
And a lot of people don't go to work anymore. So this is extremely important. You have to have a way. When you are feeling included, you are part of the socializing. And if the other people are socializing, doing things that you don't want to do, try it out and then let them know, I never tried this, but have you ever tried that?
Love these follow-up questions.
No, I do. I love that too.
I'm a counselor, and this is what I teach people how to do.
No, I love that because when I think about how often we are so we always say let's go to happy hour, right? But everyone doesn't drink, so why don't we do coffee
Exactly.
hour? Why don't we do bowling? Why don't we do other team outings? When we
Right.
think about belonging, is thinking about everyone's how everyone likes to commune together, right?
Yep.
So Blair, what do you think about this?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, see, now you're practicing her follow-up questions. I love that. I really agree, especially when you said happy hour, because I just stopped drinking. Well, let me not say it that way. I've had 3 drinks since last August, but I've really slowed it down. So going out to drink is not something that I would think to do. But I love this concept of not only is the onus on the audience or the people, the majority, but it's also on you. What you just mentioned, you said you have to do some speaking up as well. Let me ask you this question. When I think about belonging, it's really like you all have said, it's really how people feel in human nature amongst other people. To belong or to not belong is a subjective experience, right? So it's really up to you to say that. And it can be influenced by a number of factors. What would you say some of those factors are that influence a person's belonging?
Well, I think the first factor is how they're treated by the other people.
Mhm.
Or, if you're a new person, are you welcomed?
Hmm.
They have a sign for you on your desk. Did somebody think to print business cards for you?
Yeah.
Do they pay attention to orienting you so you know how the place works?
Mhm.
And then also, it's up to you to see what are the norms here? How are people treating each other? And do I want to behave that way? And if I do, that's great. And if I don't, how are they different from me? And how am I going to figure out how my norms mesh with their norms? Because I did a wonderful workshop for a bunch of high school kids a couple of months ago. Inner city Hartford kids in community college going to work in big corporations.
Mhm.
And they're kids, and some of them even have kids.
Mhm.
And I walked in and I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach you how to be white. I'm going to teach you how to walk into a white organization, watch how everybody's behaving. You don't have to change who you are, but you do not have to know how they behave because you don't want to make them uncomfortable. So you have to act in a way that fits. And then the better you know them and the better they know you, the more you can be yourself. But you first have to establish trust. And I think about belonging, the first thing about belonging is that everybody trust each other. And to what degree?
Now, see, I'm Southern. I was about to call you Miss Jane. I apologize in advance. But okay, so let me make sure I heard you correctly. Were you telling these inner city kids to learn how to be white so that they can assimilate? Or were you saying observe this majority environment so you know how they interact with one another?
Right. I was telling them, watch how they act so that you can act the way they think is a way for you to act. I was not telling them to change at all. I was just saying, you're going into a new environment and you want to be there in a way that you can be comfortable and they can be comfortable with you. So if you don't have anybody in your family who works at a big corporation, you don't know what to wear to work, you need to figure out what to wear to work.
It's fair.
You need to know what they think about arriving on time and what arriving on time means, because people have different ideas about that. So it was that kind of thing. I certainly was not talking about assimilating. On the contrary, I was talking about inserting yourself in a way that doesn't freak everybody else out, but you don't forget who you are.
Interesting. Yeah. I can think about so many times. Listen, so many times when I had to think about like, what should I say? How should I talk? How should I wear my hair? How should I wear my clothes? And you observe and you either take note and say, okay, I'm going to put on a collared shirt. Or you could say, forget it. I'm gonna have my arms out and my tattoos out, and this is how you're going to have to accept me. But I believe that comes later on with building confidence and with your career. It's a whole nother conversation. What are your thoughts?
No, I think it's an interesting subject because I think we shouldn't have to do that, but also understand the cultural norms of an organization. So I remember someone who was interviewing later on in their life came to me and said, "Hey, I'm really having a hard time interviewing," and they were interviewing for during COVID, and they were going to interviews, and everyone was dressed up. She was dressed up in the interviews, and the people were not dressed up; they were casual. And she would go to the interview and get right down to business. And I said, okay, what you have to probably start doing, and I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but you have to start asking about their family. You have to start making casual conversations.
Always.
Right. You have to be warm and welcoming because someone said you don't seem very welcoming. I can't connect with you. Right. And so, like I said, I'm not saying it's right to your, to when we think about belonging. But I'm also saying that maybe sometimes you do have to acquiesce to those cultural norms because you want people to understand what are your norms too, right? So how do you meet in the middle? And for that particular interview, I was just like, go in and ask about their family. Maybe you be a little bit more casual and don't wear a suit and tie, whatever you're fully engaging in, because people are coming to the meeting casual. So yeah, so I get you there. So it's interesting. We on the show, we very seldomly do we have allies on. So I'm excited that you're on the show today as an ally, and that you've been doing this work for so long. So maybe you talk a little bit about what are the top 3 things that allies should be doing to help create spaces of belonging and cultivate belonging for organizations and communities.
Okay, I just want to get back to that thing about ask about their families.
Yes, go Lord. Yes, go Lord.
Always ask about people's families if they're not white. If they're white, you can do it if you feel like it. But if a person is not white, you have to ask people about their family because they are their family. That's extremely important. That's a white people thing. They need to know that. Okay, now, what was the question?
But but it's interesting enough. I think you're onto something, but I think it's also a organizational culture thing, because in our organizational culture, no matter who you were, it was very relationship based. And so that was part of building those relationships. So people saying, I don't know you, so I don't know if I feel comfortable hiring you, but how can I get to know you? And like I said, I don't think that's always right. I think we should counterproductive sometimes. But to your point, I think we got to figure out what are those comfortable norms for each other that people feel comfortable with. But so my question was around allies. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, the first thing allies have to do is check their unconscious bias, because everybody has unconscious bias.
True.
If you're an American, you're a racist. If you're a white American, you can't help it because it's in the culture, right? With mayonnaise and McDonald's and everything else. It's just what it is.
Okay. They're not ready.
I have been thrown out of rooms for saying that to people. And I literally go away, Jay. We don't want you to be here anymore. So the first thing you have to do with allies, because they're so well-meaning, but they're Karens. You know what Karens are?
Yes.
Yes. I work with a lot of Karens around here, and it's very frustrating.
Bless their hearts.
The first thing you have to do is to say, let's talk about what you know about people from other cultures and what emotional reactions and what do you watch on television, and just kind of try to get people to dig down into their biases, because and normalize bias. Everybody has bias, of course you do. But what do you do when you feel your unconscious bias bubbling up? And because what that does is it frightens you, and then you can't have a good relationship with anybody. It screws up your mind. So for allies, the first thing they have to do is deal with the unconscious bias. Then the second thing you have to do is find out who you're working with and what cultures they come from or what the issues are. Because, we used to do quote unquote sensitivity training, and that is no place close to enough. You can't be sensitive to a Jamaican. You have to know about Jamaica.
Come on.
You have to know about where they came from, and you always have to know about what their religion is, even if you don't talk about it, because every other culture in the world values religion more than the United States does. And we have a thing about not talking about religion, but you cannot work with most people without understanding what their faith is. It matters. Ooh. And allies need to know that too. So first you have to check your unconscious bias. Then you have to figure out who are you working with and where do they come from and what matters to them. And I have not even talking about sexual orientation. Are you homophobic? Perfectly understandable, but let's deal with it because so-and-so is here and that's your colleague and you got to get over it because it's not their problem, it's your problem.
You know what?
Right. She can have the show. Jane, you we are
giving you the mic because that's the real thing, that we need to talk about and that people need to hear and understand. And, I love a good acronym or a good alliteration. I was trying to get it, but definitely check your unconscious bias. And then the second thing that you were saying is know your colleagues and know more about their faith. That one hit me and struck me in a different way because you're right. Your faith influences, just like we were talking about growth mentality last night. It influences how you operate in the world, but also in the work you do, how you stand up for others, how you stand up for yourself. So those things are really, really important. I love that. Did you have another one before we move on?
No, those are the two biggies.
Okay. I think they hit a home run.
And the third thing is whatever it is that you are having difficulty with, you have to figure out how to have a relationship with people. That's the ally thing. You can't just be an ally and stand on a street corner with a sign. You have to have friends
Yeah.
who trust you and will tell you what they think of whatever you're doing. And I have people who tell me off on a regular basis. And I appreciate it because I know they care about me. You have to have friends in the groups you are trying to be an ally for.
And not that one friend, not
Not
that
the one who
friend.
you expect to speak for everybody. You have to have multiple friends, multiple points of view, and that's very important. But trust is always the bottom line. People have to trust allies, and that's the way you get trusted, is to show up, to be friends with people, to support them when they need you in a way that's effective.
Love it, Jane. Listen, I've been in a lot of different rooms, voluntarily, involuntarily, in the workplace, outside of the workplace. And I'm not going to say that I've never felt like I belonged in a room.
Mhm.
Definitely later in my career, I was just, if I'm here, it's because I'm supposed to be. But early in my career, I didn't always feel that way. I would feel like, okay, this is a homogenous space. It's mostly male. It's mostly white male. I don't belong here, until I realized, I need to just bring my folding chair with me everywhere I go. And I put up my own name tag, right? I make my own announcements. But for folks that are early in their career, Jane, and I know you weren't recommending, assimilation, but it's more of observation, get to know the culture, make a determination on how to move in that culture, but then you make a determination on whether or not you should be there. So if I'm new in my career, I'm in a space that is homogenous, and I'm not sure whether or not I belong, what again would you say? I think you started talking about it, but what else would you say to that person to say, this is a place where you belong? How do I make that determination early in my career?
I'm making this up, but I'm making it up based on however much experience I've had.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, number one, observe how you're being treated and whether you're being acknowledged and paid attention to. That's really, really important by the leadership and your colleagues. The second thing I would try to do is to figure out a couple of people who look trustworthy and try to get a little friendlier with them.
Okay.
And get a sense about whether or not that works. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, it's time to look around. That's the best I could
That's it.
That's good. I can think of a training that I do when I'm talking about belonging. I think the 4 things that I usually talk about are understand your expectations as well in that space, and making sure that you're doing work that is valuable to you, along with the 2 things.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
So, organizations are still struggling to get this right when it comes to belonging. I think when we looked at, I always tell organizations that during COVID, there was this really strong sense to check in and create belonging for employees and care for them. Really, and we saw record engagement scores because we were caring about employees, but that started to level off after COVID. So what things should organizations should be continuing to do that they learned from COVID that would help them to continue to increase and strengthen belonging for their organizations?
Well, I think some of it is the leadership. The leadership has to reach down and let people know when they've accomplished something to acknowledge it. That would be one thing. But I mean, again, my background, I'm a therapist. I think people should talk to each other. So just the way you started this meeting, I would start almost every meeting with, what have you done that's interesting lately? One sentence, or start with a sentence prompt and have everybody answer it, just to bring them into the room, and never have a meeting where you just read the agenda. That's just a waste of time. If people can read, you don't need to have a meeting. So
Right.
You have to emphasize the relationships and increase the ability of people to get to know each other. And I don't mean, pour your heart out. I just mean stuff that's relevant.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed this. I think this one worked out okay, but I'm not so sure about that one. What do you think? That kind of conversation. Because engagement means that somebody sees you, somebody listens to you, and that you have people you'd like to talk to because you value their opinion. That's what it is. And then you have to have work that, I like your point about, it's not just work that you know how it fits into the organization, but it's work you value too. That's extremely important. And I think I never would have survived some of the horrible environments I've been in if I hadn't been doing things that I was convinced were very important. So I think that's important too.
Yeah. And then when you're asking more questions and getting curious, and then demonstrating that deep listening that you mentioned, that helps create that connectivity. And then I feel like someone does truly care about me, and then that increases the trust.
Right.
and then the allyship there. I love that. I know we have some rapid fire questions because we love to get to know our folks as well. But I just have one quick question is just to piggyback off of what you're saying. For folks who are out there listening, they're just like, okay, belonging is such a fluffy, like I said, subjective kind of topic. You mentioned engagement scores. Are there other metrics, or is there a metric that organizations are not paying attention to as it pertains to belonging?
Well, everybody has exit interviews, but I'd look at who's exiting, how long they stay.
Yes.
And people don't like personnel departments or human resource departments, so that people don't tell the truth when they have exit interviews. But that metric of where do you recruit? I was thinking about this. I used to run residence halls, and I would recruit in all the Black churches and the Black colleges in the South. When I was looking to hire people, I just made phone calls and I would say, hi, this is what I got. You got anybody you think might be interested? And I mean, you get to a point where you're really embarrassed because you're talking to total strangers and offering a salary you wouldn't offer to anybody. And here you are doing it. But there wasn't any other way. And I got to know the pastors in the city of Hartford because that's where all the people who were trained to do what I was looking for were. So I would ask, what's my network of recruiting? Do I have organizations where qualified people belong who are people of color? Then what do they say when they leave? And I guess you do regular employee satisfaction stuff. But in an organization where trust is really low, people don't tell the truth. So I don't know how you handle that. But I do know that anything that can be measured isn't as important as anything that can't be measured.
Yep. No, I agree with you.
Look up some metrics, but don't pretend that that's the whole story because it never is.
No, I think it's this holistic approach, right? There's so much data that we know on the employee experience, and how do we put that into that whole life cycle? And it's going to tell us where we have some gaps in belonging and inclusion and diversity, and that DEIBA continuum, right? When we think about it, so I think you're definitely onto something. I think when I think about best practices, the diversity team should be talking to the talent acquisition team, who's talking to the employee life cycle, who's talking to all of those people should be connected to make that experience equal for every employee, equitable, that comes into the organization, and want them to stay within the organization. So you're definitely exactly right on that.
And there's one other thing. There's a little sentence you say when you're starting to teach people how to be counselors, and it's the second question. It's a reflection. Happy to have you here. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And then when they're finished talking, you label their feelings and ask another question. So it looks like you're really unhappy about that. I wish I could know more about it. That little sentence, I mean, there are about 4 or 5 sentence stems that if you know how to use them in a conversation, the conversation gets real really fast. And if you don't, you're just fluffing around. But it's very simple. It's just that nobody tells anybody.
I like
so
that.
I would tell personnel, I would train everybody in those 4 or 5 basic, I don't know if you call them interviewing skills, they're conversational skills, but they're skills that allow the other person to trust you and therefore be more self-disclosing. And that's what you're trying to do.
She just dropped off. Okay, you know what?
I know it.
I'm so pleased. But I want to go back to the recruitment thing as well, because I'm often talking about the 3 R's: recruitment, retainment, and readiness. And when I ask HR folks, or when I ask leaders about where are they recruiting people of color or Black people specifically, no one is ever saying, faith organizations or churches or anything like that. But it goes back to the first thing that you said when you're asking Black people about, their family makeup, because that, how we relate to one another is our community. Our family is our community oftentimes. So if you think about going into the community like faith organizations, that can make a big difference. So thank you for that strategic piece of information, as well as so much other information. You really did a great job today, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you.
She's like, I do this.
I know. I want her to come back on. I really just want to have a session with her. Like,
you should.
Tell me with my life.
So this one wants to be, or is going to be, a relationship counselor later in life as well. So y'all should definitely.
Well, I spent 30 years teaching people how to do that. So I'd be happy to talk to you about that.
There you go. Okay. Well, I've sucked up all the time. Do you have a shout out for us?
I do have a very quick shout out today. Last week or 2 weeks ago was Nurses Week. I want to give a shout out to someone who's creating belonging and fantastic communications for nurses nurses, about 10 plus thousand nurses out there, an ally and a good friend of mine, Sabina Zolota, who is a true engagement belonging practitioner who I respect, and communication practitioner who I love and respect. So shout out to her today.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. Thank you all for joining us today and every single day, every single weekday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for your daily dose of D&B with D&B. Thank you again for joining the Black DEIBA Collective live again, Jane, and everyone have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.
No problem.